The files on the desk were still warm, but the coffee cup next to them was ice cold. That was the only clue Alpha King Dennis Riker had that his life had effectively ended, though his heart was still beating. He didn't know it yet, but the woman who had quietly held his kingdom together, the woman he had just publicly humiliated for the sake of a political alliance, wasn't just gone. She had erased herself. There were no tears, no screaming matches, and no dramatic exits. Just a silence so loud it would eventually deafen the entire continent. Dennis thought he was making a sacrifice for the crown. He was wrong. He was digging his own grave. The chandeliers inside the grand hall of the Silver Moon Packhouse didn't sparkle that night. They glared. The air was thick, suffocatingly hot, despite the late November chill rattling the windows of the estate near the jagged tree line of the Northern Territory. Every high-ranking wolf from the coalition was present, their murmurs sounding like the buzzing of agitated hornets. Dennis Riker stood at the podium. He was a man carved from granite and regret, though he wore a mask of stoic indifference. At 32, he was the Alpha King, a title that demanded blood and sacrifice. Tonight, the sacrifice was standing in the shadows of the velvet curtains, holding a clipboard. Edith Foster. She wasn't royalty. She wasn't a warrior. She was the head of logistics, the quiet human woman, or so everyone thought, who had organized Dennis's life for the past 4 years. She was also the woman who warmed his bed every night, the one who knew that he took his coffee with a dash of cinnamon, and the only person who could talk him down when the wolf inside him demanded violence. They were fated. Dennis knew it. Edith knew it. But the bond had never been completed. Dennis had stalled, citing the instability of the borders. "Tonight," Dennis's voice boomed, silenced the room. "We secure the future of the coalition to end the century-long war with the Southern clans. I am announcing my union with the daughter of the Southern Alpha." A collective gasp swept through the room, followed by thunderous applause. From the side stage, Sophia Delacroix stepped forward. She was stunning, a vision in emerald silk, with dark hair cascading down her back and a predatory smile painted on red lips. She took Dennis's hand. The flash of cameras blinded them both. Dennis didn't look at the crowd. He looked towards the curtain. Edith was standing there. She wasn't crying. That was the first thing that unsettled him. If she had cried, if she had thrown the clipboard, if she had screamed, he would have known how to handle it. He would have explained that this was temporary, a marriage of paper to prevent a massacre. He would have told her he still loved her. But Edith just stood there. She was wearing a simple grey dress that made her blend into the background. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable. She looked at him, and for a fleeting second, her eyes flashed, not with the golden hue of a wolf, but with a dull, hollow grey of a tombstone. She gave a single curt nod. It was the professional nod of a secretary acknowledging an order. Then she turned and walked away. "Dennis?" Sophia whispered, digging her manicured claws into his forearm. "The cameras are waiting for the kiss." Dennis forced himself to lean in, pressing his lips to Sophia's. It tasted like ash. His wolf, a massive black beast usually dormant in his mind, began to pace. It didn't howl. It growled, a low, vibrating threat that made Dennis's hands shake. "Go to her," the wolf urged. "Not now," Dennis pushed back. "I have to finish this speech." It took 2 hours for the gala to wind down. 2 hours of handshakes, fake smiles, and the overwhelming scent of Sophia's expensive, cloying perfume. When Dennis finally extricated himself from the Southern Alpha's grip, he loosened his tie and sprinted up the marble staircase towards the east wing. He bypassed his own chambers and went straight to the small, connected room where Edith stayed. "Edith, listen. I can explain," he said, throwing the door open. The room was dark. He flipped the light switch. The bed was made, the sheets pulled tight with military precision. The desk was clear. No papers, no laptop, no half-finished mugs of tea. Dennis walked into the room, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He opened the closet. Empty. Not just empty of clothes. It was stripped. The hangers were gone. The shoes were gone. He rushed to the bathroom. The toothbrush, the lavender soap she insisted on using, the small bottle of moisturizer, all gone. It was as if she had never existed. On the nightstand, sitting alone on the polished wood, was a small velvet box and a keycard, Dennis's access key to the Royal Archives. He opened the velvet box. Inside was a simple silver ring he had given her for her birthday 2 years ago. It wasn't an engagement ring, just a promise. A promise he had just broken in front of the entire world. Under the box was a note. It wasn't written on parchment or scented stationery. It was a standard yellow sticky note. The logistics for the merger are on your desk. The scheduled heat suppressants for the pack are ordered through March. Goodbye, Dennis. No love. No dear. Just goodbye. Lucas! Dennis roared, the sound shaking the window frames. Lucas Grant, his beta and best friend, appeared in the doorway seconds later, looking disheveled and slightly drunk from the party. Dom, what is it? Is there an attack? Where is she? Dennis snarled, grabbing Lucas by the lapels of his tuxedo. Who? Sophia? Edith. Where is Edith? Lucas blinked, confused. I saw her during the speech. She was by the curtain. I think she went to the kitchen to check on the catering. Dom, you know how she is. She works until the lights go out. She's gone, Lucas. She cleared the room. What do you mean, gone? Lucas stepped into the room, looking at the empty closet. That's impossible. She has nowhere to go. She's human. She has no family, no pack. She's been with us since she was 18. Find her, Dennis ordered, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet register. Close the gates. No one leaves the territory. Check the cameras. Check the train station in town. Check the airport. Dom, the Southern Alpha is downstairs. If you lock down the territory on the night of your engagement, it looks like an act of aggression. I don't care if it looks like a declaration of war. Dennis slammed his fist into the wall, cracking the plaster. Find her, now! But they didn't find her. The security cameras showed a grainy image of a delivery van leaving the service entrance at 8:45 p.m., exactly the moment Dennis had kissed Sophia. The van belonged to a catering company that didn't exist in the PAC's registry. The license plate was covered in mud. Dennis spent that night not in the bed of his new fiancée, but in his car, driving 120 miles per hour down the winding mountain roads, screaming her name into the void. She hadn't just left. She had evaporated. 6 months had passed since the night of the engagement. The Kingdom of the Silver Moon was technically stronger than ever. The treaty with the South was signed. Trade routes were open. The war was officially over. But the atmosphere inside the pack house was toxic. Dennis Riker sat in his office, staring at a map of the continent spread across his desk. He looked 10 years older. His eyes were rimmed with red, dark circles bruised beneath them. He hadn't shaved in days, the stubble doing nothing to hide the gaunt sharpness of his jaw. Alpha, a voice came from the door. It was Sophia. She was leaning against the doorframe, wearing a silk robe that left little to the imagination. Over the last 6 months, her initial charm had worn off, revealing a sharp, demanding personality. She hated the cold of the north, she hated the food, and most of all, she hated the ghost that haunted the hallways. Get out, Sophia, Dennis grunted, not looking up. You missed dinner again, she said, walking in and sliding a manicured hand over the map. My father is asking when we are setting the date for the wedding. The engagement was 6 months ago, Dennis. People are talking. Let them talk. They say the Alpha King is losing his mind over a human secretary, Sophia spat, her voice losing its sweetness. It's embarrassing. She was a servant, Dennis, a bed warmer. Dennis moved so fast that Sophia didn't even see him stand up. One moment he was seated. The next, he had his hand wrapped around her throat, not squeezing to kill, but holding her pinned against the heavy oak bookshelf. His eyes were glowing a violent, unstable crimson. Speak of her again, Dennis whispered, and the treaty with your father will be the only thing keeping you alive. and even that is wearing thin." Sophia gasped for air, her eyes wide with genuine fear. He released her, and she slumped to the floor, coughing. "She is not dead," Dennis said, turning back to the window. "I can feel her." It was true, the mate bond, though uncompleted, hadn't snapped. Usually if a mate died, the surviving wolf would feel a terrible tearing sensation, followed by a hollowness that often led to suicide. Dennis felt the hollowness, but not the tear. It was a dull ache, like a phantom limb. She was out there, somewhere, but she was hiding. Lucas entered the room as Sophia fled, sobbing. He looked at Dennis with a mixture of pity and exhaustion. "We have a lead," Lucas said softly. Dennis's head snapped up. "Where?" "It's thin, Dom. Very thin. But the private investigator, Aris Pendergast, the one we hired in London, he found a bank transaction. Edith didn't have a bank account. I paid her in cash or handled her expenses. That's what we thought," Lucas said, placing a folder on the desk. But apparently, Edith had an account under a maiden name, her mother's name. Valkyrie. Dennis froze. Edith never spoke of her mother. She claimed to be an orphan from the system. "The transaction was small," Lucas continued. "A purchase at a pharmacy in a coastal town called Oakhaven. It's a neutral territory, mostly human, but run by a circle of witches who don't answer to the Wolf Council." "When was this?" "Yesterday." Dennis grabbed his jacket. "Ready the jet." "Dom, wait," Lucas warned, stepping in front of him. "If you go to Oakhaven with an alpha force, the witches will view it as an invasion. You can't just storm in there and tear the town apart." "Watch me." "Think about Edith," Lucas shouted. "Why did she run? Why did she hide so well? If she sees you coming with a war party, she'll run again. And Oakhaven is surrounded by the sea. If she gets on a boat, we lose her forever." Dennis stopped. His chest heaved. The wolf wanted to hunt, to chase, to claim. But the man knew Lucas was right. Edith was smart. She was the smartest person he knew. She had planned the logistics of a war. She knew how to evade a tracking party. "2 men," Dennis said, his voice straining with control. "Just me and you. We go in civilian clothes. We find her. We talk to her. And if she doesn't want to come back?" Lucas asked, the question that had been haunting Dennis for half a year. Dennis touched the silver ring in his pocket, the metal warm against his skin. "Then I'll burn the world down until she changes her mind," Dennis lied. He knew he wouldn't burn the world. He would burn himself. The town of Oakhaven sat on the edge of the world, where the grey Atlantic Ocean crashed violently against black cliffs. It was a place that didn't appear on most GPS systems, a sanctuary protected by ancient laws and thick, magical fog. It was neutral ground, run by the Coven of the Silver Circle, witches who tolerated wolves but did not fear them. Dennis and Lucas arrived in a rented sedan, the nondescript vehicle looking out of place among the vintage trucks and bicycles that populated the cobblestone streets. "The magic here is thick," Lucas muttered, rubbing his temples. "It's messing with my scent. I can't smell anything but salt and sage." Dennis gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. His wolf was pacing inside his mind, agitated, clawing at the walls of his psyche. "She's here," the beast growled. "Close." They parked near the town square. The air was damp, chilling Dennis to the bone. He pulled his collar up, hiding his face. If the witches identified the Alpha King on their soil without an invitation, it could spark a diplomatic crisis. But Dennis didn't care about politics anymore. He had traded his happiness for politics once, and he would never do it again. They found the pharmacy, a small shop with dried herbs hanging in the window. The bell chimed as they entered. An elderly woman with sharp, intelligent eyes looked up from the counter. "We are closed for tourists," she said, her voice like dry leaves. Dennis stepped forward, placing a photo on the counter. It was a candid shot of Edith he had taken years ago, laughing at a joke only he had heard. "I'm not a tourist. I'm looking for her." The woman glanced at the photo, then at Dennis. Her eyes narrowed. "You have the eyes of a wolf, but the desperation of a lost dog. Why do you hunt Valkyrie?" Edith, Dennis corrected. Her name is Edith. Names are fluid here, the witch said. She came to us seeking peace. Why should I help you break it? Because she is mine, Dennis growled, the alpha tone slipping into his voice. The jars on the shelves rattled. The witch didn't flinch. She simply pointed a gnarled finger towards the cliffs. She is where the sea meets the sky. But be warned, Wolf King. You may find her, but you may not like what you find. She is not the same woman who filed your papers. Dennis didn't wait for an explanation. He signaled Lucas, and they exited the shop, moving quickly towards the coastal path. The path wound up the cliffside, surrounded by wildflowers that shouldn't be blooming in November. The magic of the witches kept this place in a perpetual state of autumn, suspended in time. They crested the hill, and there it was, a small cottage with smoke curling from the chimney. A garden out front was lush with vegetables and herbs. And there she was. Dennis stopped so abruptly that Lucas bumped into him. Edith was kneeling in the garden, pulling weeds. She wore a thick, knitted cardigan and loose linen trousers. Her hair, usually pulled back in a severe bun, was loose, blowing wildly in the sea breeze. She looked healthier than Dennis had ever seen her. Her skin glowed with a rosy hue, the pallor of the office gone. But that wasn't what stopped Dennis's heart. As Edith stood up to wipe her forehead, she placed a hand on her stomach. She was heavily pregnant. Dennis felt the ground tilt beneath his feet. 6 months. She had been gone 6 months. The swell of her belly was undeniable, round, high, and unmistakably carrying life. "Dom," Lucas whispered, his voice choked with shock. "Is that? It's mine," Dennis breathed, the realization crashing into him like a tidal wave. He remembered the night before the engagement was announced, the one time they had been careless, lost in the desperation of their unspoken goodbye. He hadn't known she was pregnant. She hadn't known. Or had she? She left to protect the pup, Lucas said, piecing it together. Sophia. If Sophia knew Edith was carrying the heir, Sophia would have killed them both before the ink dried on the marriage certificate, Dennis finished, a cold rage settling in his gut. He watched as a man stepped out of the cottage door. He was tall, with broad shoulders and sandy blonde hair. He carried a tray of tea. He walked over to Edith, laughing, and placed a hand on her shoulder. It was a gesture of familiarity, of protection. Dennis's vision went red. He didn't think. He didn't plan. He roared, a sound that tore through the peaceful silence of the cliffs, and charged. Edith dropped the gardening trowel as the roar echoed off the cliff face. She knew that sound. It was the sound that had haunted her dreams for 180 nights. "Dennis," she whispered. Beside her, Declan, the man Dennis had seen, stepped in front of her immediately. Declan wasn't a wolf. He was a warden, a guardian class of humans trained by the witches to police the neutral territories. He reached for the baton at his belt, but Edith grabbed his arm. "No, Declan, don't." Dennis stopped 10 feet away, his chest heaving. Lucas flanked him, hands raised to show they weren't attacking, though Dennis looked ready to rip Declan's throat out. "Get away from her," Dennis snarled at Declan. "Dennis, stop!" Edith's voice was sharp, authoritative. It was the voice she used when he was about to make a bad business deal, the voice that cut through his alpha command. Dennis's eyes snapped to her, traveling down to her stomach. His expression shattered. The rage evaporated, replaced by a look of such profound agony that Edith had to look away. "You're pregnant," he said, his voice trembling. "Yes," Edith replied, wrapping her arms protectively around her belly. "Is it?" "You know it is," she said softly. Dennis took a step forward, his hand reaching out. "Why? Why didn't you tell me? I would have burned the treaty. You would have started a war, Dennis," Edith cried, tears finally spilling over. "The southern clans would have seen my child as a threat to Sophia's claim. They would have sent assassins. You couldn't watch me 24 hours a day. I had to leave. I had to choose, your kingdom or your child." Dennis fell to his knees. The Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in the Northern Hemisphere, knelt in the dirt in front of his former secretary. I would have chosen you. I always chose you. But you didn't, she said, her voice breaking. You chose the crown, and I don't blame you for that, Dennis. You are a king. Kings make sacrifices. But I am a mother now. My sacrifice is different. Come home, Dennis pleaded. Sophia. I'll handle Sophia. I'll annul the marriage. I don't care about the politics. It's too late, Declan spoke up, his voice calm but firm. You were followed, Riker. Dennis stood up, confused. What? We tracked a tail on you from the moment you crossed the border, Declan said, scanning the tree line behind Dennis. Mercenaries, high-end ones. As if on cue, the whistle of a silhouetted arrow cut through the air. It struck Declan in the shoulder, spinning him around. He groaned, falling to one knee. Get down! Lucas screamed, shifting mid-air into his russet-coloured wolf form to block the next volley of arrows. From the trees, 6 figures emerged. They were dressed in tactical gear, wearing masks. They weren't southern wolves. They were rogues, hired killers who had no scent and no honour. Sophia hadn't just been complaining about the wedding date. She had been tracking Dennis, waiting for him to lead her to the loose end she needed to cut. Kill the woman, one of the mercenaries shouted. Leave the king alive, but gut the breeder. Dennis's world narrowed to a single point. Gut the breeder. The beast didn't just wake up. It took over. Dennis's bones cracked and reshaped in seconds. A massive, midnight black wolf with eyes like burning coals burst forth, shredding his clothes. He didn't howl. He launched himself at the nearest mercenary, tearing the man's throat out before the body even hit the ground. Lucas was fighting 2 others, his teeth snapping at their tactical vests. But 2 mercenaries bypassed the wolves, sprinting straight for Edith. Edith stumbled back, tripping over the gardening tools. She scrambled backward, clutching her stomach. Declan! Declan, bleeding from the arrow wound, tried to stand but collapsed. The first mercenary raised a machete, ready to strike. Edith squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the end. Bang! A gunshot rang out, deafeningly loud. The mercenary with the machete dropped, a hole in his chest. Edith opened her eyes. Standing at the cottage door was Evelyn, the old pharmacist witch. She was holding a smoking shotgun. It seemed the witches of Oakhaven believed in more than just magic. Get inside, Evelyn yelled, but the second mercenary was too close. He lunged for Edith. Dennis saw it. He was 50 feet away, engaged with another killer. He couldn't reach her in time. He felt the bond in his chest scream. A high-pitched wail of impending loss. No! Dennis threw his head back and let out a roar that wasn't just sound. It was kinetic energy. The Alpha voice. It was forbidden to use it at full power because it could rupture organs. But he didn't care. Submit! The air rippled. The mercenary froze mid-air, his brain short-circuiting from the sheer command. He collapsed, blood trickling from his ears, paralyzed by the Alpha order. Dennis crossed the distance in a blur of black fur. He didn't just kill the mercenary. He obliterated him, standing over Edith's prone form like a statue of vengeance. Silence fell over the cliffside. The mercenaries were dead. Lucas was panting, bleeding from a cut on his flank. Dennis shifted back to human form. He was naked, bloody, and terrifying. He turned to Edith, his chest heaving. He fell to his knees beside her, his bloody hands hovering over her, afraid to touch her. "Did they hurt you?" he rasped. Edith shook her head, shock rendering her mute. She looked at his bloody hands, then at his face. The man who had carefully signed treaties and worn tuxedos was gone. This was a monster. But it was her monster. "You used the voice," Lucas said, limping over. "Dom, you could have killed her too." "I controlled it," Dennis whispered, though he wasn't sure he had. He looked at Edith's stomach. "Is the baby—" Edith took his hand, disregarding the blood, and placed it on her belly. A strong kick thumped against Dennis's palm. He let out a sob, resting his forehead against her shoulder. "I'm taking you home, Edith. I don't care if I have to fight the South, the witches, and the Council. You are coming home." Edith looked at the carnage in her garden. She looked at Declan, who was being attended to by Evelyn. She knew her quiet life in Oakhaven was over. Sophia knew where she was. The hunt had begun. "I can't go back to the pack house, Dennis," Edith said, her voice trembling but resolute. "Sophia controls the guards. She controls the food. If I go back there, I'm dead." "Then where?" Dennis asked. "Where is safe?" Evelyn stepped forward, reloading her shotgun with a decisive clack-clack. "There is one place," the witch said, "but you won't like it, Alpha King. It requires you to trust the one person you hate more than the Southern Alpha." Dennis looked up. "Who?" "Your exiled brother," Evelyn said. "Sebastian." Dennis froze. Sebastian Riker had been banished 5 years ago for attempting a coup. He was a psychopath, a warlord who ruled the lawless Badlands. "He will kill me on sight," Dennis said. "Perhaps," Evelyn shrugged. "But he hates the Southern clans more than he hates you, and his fortress is the only place Sophia's assassins cannot breach." Dennis looked at Edith. She was terrified, but she was looking at him with total trust. "Call the jet," Dennis said to Lucas. "We're going to the Badlands." The Badlands were not a place where life flourished. They were a place where life survived out of spite. The landscape was a graveyard of rusted industrial machinery and jagged canyons, shrouded in a perpetual smog that blocked out the moon. Dennis's private jet had been forced to land on a cracked airstrip 10 miles outside the perimeter of the Iron Citadel. From there, they traveled in a reinforced Humvee provided by a contact Lucas had kept secret for years. Edith sat in the back seat, her hand resting on her stomach. She looked out at the desolate wasteland. "He lives here?" she asked softly. "He rules here," Dennis corrected, his eyes scanning the horizon for ambush. "Sebastian turned a prison into a kingdom. Don't let his charm fool you, Edith. He is a viper." They arrived at the gates of the Iron Citadel. It was a fortress built into the side of a mountain, fortified with steel spikes and manned by wolves who wore no pack colors, rogues, exiles, and criminals who had sworn loyalty to the only Alpha who would take them. The gates groaned open. Dennis, Lucas, and Edith walked into the main courtyard. Hundreds of eyes watched them, hard, hungry eyes. At the top of the metal stairs stood a man who looked like a distorted reflection of Dennis. Sebastian Riker was taller, leaner, and covered in tattoos that marked his kills. A jagged scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, a souvenir from the fight that had led to his exile. "Little brother," Sebastian drawled, his voice like gravel in a mixer. He descended the stairs, a massive grey wolf flanking him. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Did you run out of silk sheets in the capital?" "I need sanctuary," Dennis said, his voice steady. He didn't bow. An Alpha never bows, not even to his own blood. Sebastian laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Sanctuary. You banished me to this hellhole, and now you want to sleep on my couch." His eyes drifted to Edith. He sniffed the air, his expression shifting from amusement to intrigue. "And you brought a human, a pregnant human." Sebastian circled Edith. Dennis stepped in front of her, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Touch her, and I finish what I started 5 years ago," Dennis warned. Sebastian held up his hands in mock surrender. "Relax, I don't kill mothers. It's bad luck." He looked at Edith. "You must be special. Dennis Riker destroying his political alliances for a logistics manager? The gossip networks are on fire." "We need a safe house, Sebastian," Edith spoke up, stepping out from behind Dennis. Her voice was calm, surprising both men. "Sophia Delacroix has sent mercenaries. They used Southern military tactics. If they find us, they kill the heir to the throne. If the heir dies, the Riker bloodline ends with you two." Sebastian stopped smiling. He looked at Edith with newfound respect. "Smart. Playing the legacy card." "It's not a card, it's a fact," Edith said. "You hate the Southern clans. They killed your mate." The air in the courtyard dropped 10 degrees. Dennis tensed. No one spoke of Sebastian's mate. She had been a casualty of a border skirmish years ago. the event that had driven Sebastian mad with grief and led to his failed coup. Sebastian walked up to Edith, towering over her. "You have courage, little human, or you are stupid." "I'm desperate," Edith said, "and I'm offering you a deal." "You?" Sebastian raised an eyebrow. "What can you offer me?" "Dennis is the king," Edith said, gesturing to the man beside her. "Help us survive. Help us take back the capital from Sofia, and Dennis will lift your banishment. He will grant you the Eastern Territories as an autonomous region. You won't be an exile anymore. You'll be a lord." Dennis looked at Edith, shocked. They hadn't discussed this. Giving Sebastian the East was dangerous. It split the kingdom. Sebastian looked at Dennis. "Is she speaking for you now, brother?" Dennis looked at the desperate determination in Edith's eyes. She was negotiating for their child's life. He nodded slowly. "She is my queen in all but title. Her word is my bond. Help us destroy Sofia, and the East is yours." Sebastian stared at them for a long, agonizing minute. Then a slow, terrifying grin spread across his face. "I always did want a castle with a view," Sebastian said. He turned to his men. "Open the armory. We have a war to plan." While Dennis and Sebastian prepared for war in the Badlands, the capital of Silver Moon had fallen into a terrified silence. Sophia Delacroix stood on the balcony of the Alpha King's estate, looking out over the city. She held a glass of champagne, but her knuckles were white. "The mercenaries failed," a voice said from the shadows behind her. It was her father, Alpha Marcus of the South. He was a brute of a man, aging but powerful, with eyes that held no warmth. "I know," Sophia snapped. "They didn't report back. That means Dennis found them." "He will come for you," Marcus said, stepping into the light. "He will come with fire and blood. You should have just let him have the girl as a mistress, Sophia. You pushed too hard." "No," Sophia smashed her glass against the railing. "I am the queen. I will not be second to a human servant. I have the ring. I have the treaty." "You have a piece of paper," Marcus rumbled. "Dennis has the loyalty of the pack. If he returns, the guards will turn on us." "Not if they think he's a traitor," Sophia said, her eyes gleaming with a new, twisted plan. The next morning, the news broadcasts across the kingdom were interrupted. Sophia sat at the Alpha's desk, wearing black, tears streaming down her face. She looked devastated. "Citizens of the Silver Moon," she sobbed into the camera. "It is with a broken heart that I announce the betrayal of our former king. Dennis Riker has abdicated. He has chosen to abandon his people, breaking our sacred treaty with the South, to run away with a human spy who is selling our secrets to our enemies." It was a masterclass in manipulation. She didn't just paint Dennis as a lover, leaving for romance. She painted him as a traitor, leaving with a spy. "Evidence has been found," Sophia continued, holding up forged documents, "that Edith Foster was funneling PAC funds to the rogue insurgencies. Dennis was complicit. He has chosen treason over duty. By the laws of the Coalition, the throne is vacant. As his fiancé and the representative of the Southern Alliance, my father and I will assume temporary control to ensure your safety." In the Badlands, Dennis watched the broadcast on a cracked monitor in Sebastian's war room. He didn't scream. He didn't break the screen. He went perfectly still. "She called Edith a spy," Lucas whispered, horrified. "She's poisoning the pack against you. If we go back now, the citizens might attack us themselves." "She's scared," Sebastian said, cleaning a massive serrated knife. "Only scared people lie that loud." Edith sat in the corner, her face pale. "She's not just attacking you, Dennis. She's attacking your character. She's trying to make sure that even if you win, you lose the people." Dennis stood up. He walked over to the map of the capital spread on the table. "Sebastian," Dennis said, his voice cold and devoid of emotion, "how many men do you have?" 200 combat-ready wolves, 50 heavy weapons specialists." "It's not enough to storm the front gate," Lucas said. "The capital garrison is 5,000 strong." "We aren't going through the front gate," Dennis said. He pointed to a spot on the map, the sewers beneath the logistics wing. Edith's eyes widened. The supply tunnels, I used those to route discreet shipments of medical supplies during the epidemic 3 years ago. They come up right under the ballroom. Exactly, Dennis said. Sophia is holding a coronation ceremony for herself in 2 days. She wants to cement her rule quickly. All the high-ranking officials will be in the ballroom. We infiltrate, Sebastian mused, nodding. Cut the head off the snake in front of the audience. But there's a problem, Edith said. The tunnels are rigged with pressure sensors. I had them installed to prevent theft. Can you bypass them? Dennis asked. I can, Edith said, but not from here. I have to be at the terminal. No, Dennis said immediately. You are staying here. It's too dangerous. Dennis, Edith stood up, walking over to him. She took his face in her hands. This is my war too. She called me a spy. She sent men to kill our child. I am not staying behind while you fight for my future. I'm the only one who knows the codes. If I don't go, you trigger the alarms, and you die. Dennis looked at her. He wanted to lock her in a tower and keep her safe, but he saw the fire in her eyes, the same fire that had made him fall in love with her in the office, watching her command generals and manage economies. You stay behind the line, Dennis ordered, with Lucas. You do not engage. You hack the door, and you pull back. Agreed, Edith said. Dennis turned to his brother. Get your wolves ready. We ride at dusk. The drive back to the capital was a silent march of death. They moved in unmarked trucks, slipping through the borders under the cover of a storm Sebastian's weather witches had conjured. They arrived at the outskirts of the city 2 nights later. The capital was draped in southern banners. Red and gold, Sophia's colors, covered the silver moon emblems. It made Dennis's blood boil. They entered the tunnels. The air was damp and smelled of rust. Edith led the way, a tablet in her hand, hacking the security nodes as they progressed. Dennis stayed glued to her side, his body a shield. We're under the ballroom, Edith whispered, pointing to a service hatch above them. They could hear the music, the muffled sound of violins and the clinking of glasses. It's time, Dennis said. He looked at Sebastian. Remember the plan. No civilian casualties, only the Southern Guards. Sebastian grinned, his teeth flashing in the dark. I'll try to be gentle. Dennis turned to Edith. He kissed her, a desperate, searing kiss that tasted of fear and hope. Stay with Lucas. If this goes wrong, run. It won't go wrong, she whispered. Dennis nodded to Sebastian. Sebastian kicked the hatch open. Explosions of smoke bombs, non-lethal but blinding, filled the ballroom instantly. The music died in a screech of feedback. Screams erupted. Dennis vaulted out of the floor, shifting mid-air. The massive black alpha wolf landed in the center of the room, letting out a roar that shook the champagne flutes off the tables. The smoke cleared enough to reveal the scene. Sophia was on the throne stage, frozen in shock. Her father, Marcus, was drawing a sword, but they were surrounded. Sebastian's wolves poured out of the vents and doors, circling the room, their growls drowning out the screams. Dennis shifted back to human form, standing tall, naked from the waist up, covered in tunnel grime and war paint. You're sitting in my chair, Dennis said to Sophia. The entire room went silent. The cameras, which were broadcasting the coronation live, zoomed in on the resurrected king. Dennis, Sophia stammered, her face draining of color. You're a traitor. Guards, seize him. The Capitol Guards hesitated. They looked at their king. They looked at the Southern soldiers. The only traitor here is the one who hired rogues to murder an unborn child. Dennis's voice boomed, projecting to every corner of the room. The one who lied to her people. The one who invited a foreign army into our home. Lies! Marcus shouted. Kill him! Marcus lunged, and the war for the Silver Moon began. The ballroom, once a sanctuary of crystal chandeliers and velvet drapes, had dissolved into a chaotic arena of shattered glass and primal violence. The opulent gala, intended to cement a stolen dynasty, had transformed into a battlefield in the blink of an eye. Alpha Marcus, the patriarch of the southern clans, was not a man easily cowed. Despite his age, he moved with the heavy, calculated momentum of a freight train. He wielded a decorative broadsword he had snatched from a wall mount, swinging it in deadly, hissing arcs that aimed to sever heads. "You ruined everything!" Marcus roared, his face purple with exertion as he slashed at Dennis. "We offered you peace. We offered you an empire." Dennis ducked under the blade, the steel whistling inches above his ear. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't need one. He was the weapon. "You offered me chains," Dennis retorted, his voice a guttural growl that vibrated in the chests of everyone nearby. He stepped inside Marcus's guard with terrifying speed. With a sickening crunch, Dennis caught the older Alpha's wrist mid-swing, twisting it with enough torque to snap bone. Marcus dropped the sword, howling in pain, but the injury only triggered his shift. In a burst of shredding fabric, the Southern Alpha transformed into a massive, brindle-colored wolf, his jaws snapping for Dennis's throat. Dennis didn't shift. He didn't need the fur to channel the beast. He focused all his Alpha power into a single, kinetic strike. He delivered a hook to the wolf's snout that sounded like a gunshot. The impact lifted the massive beast off the ground, sending Marcus skidding across the polished marble floor. He crashed into the long buffet table, burying himself in a shower of crystal punch bowls and expensive hors d'oeuvres. While the kings fought, the room remained a swirl of chaos. Sebastian Riker was laughing. For the exiled brother, this wasn't just a coup. It was the most fun he had had in 5 years. He fought 3 Southern guards simultaneously, moving like a blur of violence, his jagged knife parrying their spears. His exiled wolves, ragged, scarred and hungry, fought with a discipline that put the royal guards to shame. They weren't killing the innocent guests. They were forming a protective perimeter, shielding the pack members from the Southern soldiers who had turned on them. Sophia saw her father fall. She saw the tide turning. The illusion of her control was shattering along with the fine china. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced her arrogance. She scrambled off the throne stage, hiking up the heavy layers of her coronation gown, her heels clicking frantically against the floor as she bolted toward the emergency exit on the east wall. She reached the double doors, pushing the panic bar with all her strength. Nothing happened. She shoved again, harder, throwing her shoulder against the wood. It was immovable. Suddenly, a heavy mechanical thud echoed through the room as the electronic locks on every door in the hall engaged simultaneously. The lights in the ballroom flickered once, then stabilized, turning a harsh interrogation white. Sophia spun around, her back pressed against the sealed exit. "Going somewhere, Sophia?" The voice boomed through the ballroom's surround sound system, cutting through the din of battle. High above the fray, standing on the DJ's balcony behind the reinforced glass of the control booth, stood Edith. She held a tablet in one hand, her fingers flying across the screen. She looked down at the woman who had tried to erase her existence, her expression one of calm, terrifying competence. Sophia's eyes went wide. She saw the pregnant woman she had dismissed as a servant standing tall, flanked by Lucas and 2 of Sebastian's toughest enforcers. "You!" Sophia screeched, her voice cracking. Her face contorted, the mask of the poised queen falling away to reveal the frightened, vicious child beneath. "I should have killed you myself." Desperation made her sloppy. It also made her dangerous. Sophia reached into the lace garter on her thigh and pulled out a small, silver-plated pistol. It was a compact weapon, but at this range it was deadly. She raised the gun, her trembling hands locking onto Edith's silhouette in the booth. "No!" Dennis roared from across the room. He was too far away. He had just finished subduing Marcus and was 30 feet of crowded floor away from the balcony. The bond in his chest screamed, a high-pitched wail of impending loss that nearly brought him to his knees. He lunged forward, shoving guests aside, but he knew the physics of the situation. He couldn't reach her in time. Edith didn't flinch. She didn't duck. She just watched Sophia. Bang! The sound was deafening in the enclosed acoustic space. Dennis's heart stopped beating for a full second. But Edith didn't fall. The glass of the booth didn't shatter. Instead, Sophia stumbled back, a high-pitched scream tearing from her throat. The silver pistol clattered to the marble floor, sliding away. Sophia clutched her right hand, which was now a ruin of red. High above, nestled in the shadows of the lighting rig on the opposite side of the room, Aris Pendergast adjusted the scope of his sniper rifle. The private investigator Lucas had hired weeks ago exhaled slowly, the barrel of his weapon smoking slightly. "Nice shot," Lucas muttered into his comms, stepping forward to shield Edith, though the threat was effectively neutralized. The ballroom fell into a stunned silence. The fighting ceased as the Southern Guards realized their leadership was decimated. Sophia stood alone, cradling her maimed hand, sobbing. Her father was unconscious, her army was disarmed, and the pack, the people she had tried to rule through fear and lies, were staring at her. Their expressions had shifted from terror to a cold, hard disgust. Dennis walked toward her. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He walked with the heavy, terrifying gait of a predator who has cornered its prey. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea, shrinking away from the raw power radiating off him. He stopped inches from Sophia. He towered over her, his chest heaving. Blood that wasn't his splattered across his torso. "It's over," Dennis said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I am the Queen," Sophia spat, though she was trembling violently. Tears streaking her mascara into black rivers down her cheeks. "My father's army will burn this city to ash. You cannot touch me. I have diplomatic immunity." "Your father's army just surrendered," Sebastian called out from the buffet area. He was dragging the unconscious Alpha Marcus by the scruff of his neck, dumping the heavy man onto the floor like a sack of trash. "Turns out they don't like dying for a lost cause. The check bounced, Sophia." Dennis turned his back on her, facing the room. He looked at the nobles, the pack elders, the terrified waiters, and the warriors. He needed them to see this. He needed them to choose. "This woman," Dennis announced, his voice projecting to every corner of the silent hall, "conspired to murder my heir. She lied to you about my abdication. She tried to sell our sovereignty and our freedom to the South to satisfy her own vanity. What is the penalty for treason?" For a moment there was only silence. Then a low rumble began at the back of the room. "Death," a warrior growled. Then an elder spoke up. "Death." The chant caught fire, spreading through the crowd, a wave of anger from a pack that realized how close they had come to slavery. "Death! Death! Death!" Sophia shrank back against the door, her eyes darting around wildly. She had lost the only thing that truly mattered, the crowd. Dennis raised a hand. The silence that followed was instant and absolute. "I won't kill you," Dennis said, looking over his shoulder at her. "That would be too easy, and I am done with death today." He gestured to Sebastian. "Take them. The Badlands need new workers for the silver mines. The chemical smog is thick there, and the work is hard. Let them see what life is like without silk, servants, and schemes. Let them dig for the very silver they coveted so much." Sophia screamed, a raw, horrified sound, as Sebastian's guard seized her and her father. "No, you can't! I am royalty! Dennis, please!" Her screams faded as they were dragged out the side exit, leaving a heavy, ringing silence in the ballroom. Dennis didn't watch them go. He turned his eyes upward to the balcony. Edith was still standing by the control panel, but the adrenaline was fading. She swayed slightly, her hand instinctively going to her stomach. Dennis didn't wait for the stairs. He vaulted onto the stage and sprinted up the access ramp to the booth. He burst through the door and caught her, just as her knees buckled. He scooped her up into his arms, burying his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling the scent of rain, fear, and home. "You hacked the doors," he whispered against her hair, his hands shaking as he held her. "You trapped them." "I told you," she murmured, resting her head against his bare chest, listening to the frantic rhythm of his heart slowing down. "I handle the logistics. You handle the rest." 3 months later. The early spring breeze drifted through the open windows of the Alpha's private residence, carrying the scent of blooming wildflowers and thawing earth. The pack house was quiet, but it was a happy quiet, a peace that felt earned rather than enforced. Dennis Riker sat in the nursery, a room painted in soft hues of sage and cream. He was rocking a hand-carved wooden cradle. Inside, wrapped in a blanket knitted by the witches of Oakhaven, a tiny bundle slept soundly. A baby girl, with a tuft of jet-black hair and eyes that, even when closed, promised the golden fire of her father and the grey storms of her mother. Clara. The door creaked open softly. Edith walked in, carrying 2 steaming mugs of tea. She wore a simple cotton dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked tired, the bone-deep exhaustion of a new mother, but her eyes were bright. She sat on the wide arm of the rocking chair, leaning her weight against Dennis's shoulder. "Is she finally asleep?" Edith whispered, peering into the cradle. "For now," Dennis said, his voice a low rumble so as not to wake the child. "She has your stubbornness. She fought the nap for an hour. And your temper," Edith countered with a soft laugh, sipping her tea. "I saw her growl at a teddy bear earlier." Dennis smiled, reaching out to trace the curve of Edith's jaw. He looked at the ring on her finger. It wasn't the simple silver band anymore. It was the Queen's ring, a heavy, ancient piece of history set with a moonstone that she wore with surprising ease. They had married in a private ceremony a week after the battle. There had been no press, no foreign dignitaries, and no politics. Just the pack, the family, and the truth. "Sebastian sent a gift," Dennis said, nodding toward a large, extravagantly wrapped package sitting on the changing table. "Oh no," Edith groaned, though she was smiling. "Is it a knife? Please tell me he didn't send an infant a knife. Worse, it's a pony, a live pony. It's currently in the stables eating all the carrots. The note says, 'Every niece of the Lord of the East needs a proper war mount.'" Edith shook her head, laughing softly. Sebastian had taken to his new role as Lord of the East with frightening efficiency. The trade routes were secure, the rogues were being integrated into society, and the Badlands were slowly becoming a thriving industrial hub. The kingdom was healing, scarred but stronger than before. Dennis set his tea down and took Edith's hand, lacing their fingers together. The playfulness faded from his face, replaced by a fierce, quiet intensity. "We almost lost this," he said, looking around the room, then at her, and finally at Clara. "All of this." "But we didn't," Edith said firmly, squeezing his hand. "We fought for it. We bled for it." "I promised myself in the Badlands," Dennis said, "that I would never choose the crown over you again. I intend to keep that promise, Edith, every single day." "Good," Edith said, leaning down to kiss his forehead, "because being a king is a full-time job, but being a father is forever, and I have some new logistics for you to approve." Dennis raised an eyebrow. "Oh? Are we invading another country?" "No," she smiled, "but the nursery needs repainting. Clara hates this shade of sage, and I think we need to restructure the education budget to include more arts programs." Dennis laughed, the sound light and free, unburdened by the weight of the world. "Whatever you say, my queen. Whatever you say." He looked out the window. The moon was full, hanging huge and silver over the forest. Far in the distance, the howl of a wolf echoed through the valley. It wasn't a howl of war or pain or loneliness. It was a song of belonging. The Alpha King had found his mate, the kingdom had found its queen, and for the first time in a long time, the night was not dark. It was bright with the promise of tomorrow. And that is the story of how a king nearly lost everything to find the one thing that truly mattered. From the heartbreak of a forced betrayal to the violent redemption in the Badlands, Dennis and Edith proved that true power isn't about the crown you wear, but the people you protect. It's a reminder that sometimes you have to burn the old world down to build a new one worth living in. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of werewolf romance, betrayal, and justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. I post new dramas every week. What did you think of Sebastian's redemption arc? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.